you put the fleischiger knife in the milchiger dishwasher, or vice versa, or you found it in the fleischiger, or you use the wrong pot. You use a fleischiger pot to cook your parv. Could I eat it with milchiks? I used my milchiger pot tray to bake a cake, and now I want to use it with my fleischiks. I cooked fleischiks in a milchiger pot. I cooked milchik in a fleischiger pot. What happens at the end of the day? Do I have to throw everything out? So obviously, it's always recommended to ask a shiloh when something happens. But just to give a basic understanding of what the issue is or isn't, you have a little understanding of what's going on here. And what's even more common is you take a knife. Everybody knows you cut the onion with a fleischiger knife. Now, what's the deal with the onion? What's the deal with the fleischiger knife? What if I cut, challah? So I'm going to discuss this a little bit and give it a little bit of understanding. So, to start with, there's something called Sugin Halacha called Dogim Sha'olu B'Kaira. More talks about if you have a fish that you served on a hot fish on a fleischiger plate, so you can't eat it with kutach, you can't eat it with milchiks. Okay, you have something parv, which is on a hot plate. So the question is, could you? I should say you can't. You could. The question is, could you eat it with milchik? So what's the issue over here? What's the shiloh? So the shiloh is like this. We know that when you have a fleischiger pot and you cook it, so all the meat that's in that pot, we say comes out and mixes into the food that's being cooked into the pot, right? We know such a concept, and therefore, if you don't have 60 times the amount of food against the pot, which we always say you don't have, then the food becomes fleischigs. And if you're cooking milk in a fleischiger pot, so then the food becomes treif, because you have a fleischiger pot and you're cooking milk, and the flesh goes into the milk, and you have a problem. That we know. Assuming everything is what we call a ben yoimai, everything was used the same day, and we'll get into if it's not used the same day later, but just you have real fleischigs in a pot, it comes out, it goes into the milk, you have a problem. Okay. But the question is like this. The fleischigs that went into a pot that goes into a potato, let's say, or something else, or your pasta, you cook pasta in a pot, and now I cooked the pasta in a fleischiger pot, and now I want to put cheese on that pasta. So the question is, what is the status of this pasta? Now, the simple answer would be, well, the pasta is fleischigs, because it was cooked in a fleischiger pot. But the not so simple answer is, this is a classical case of not bar not. Okay, not bar not. Now, not bar not means nun tes, bar nun tes. It's nice and tam, bar nice and tam. So what do we mean by that? We mean like this, that normally when you have the blias, we call, or the fleishik that's in the walls of the pot, and comes out into milk, it makes a treif. We call that nice and tam. There's nice and tam coming out, there's taste. We call it taste. Okay, the taste is coming out of the pot and going into the milk, and you have a grand problem. But if the taste goes into something else, so now we're 2 steps removed. First the taste went into the pot, and now from the pot it went into the potato or the pasta or something else. So the question is, could that taste, which is double diluted, now have the power to go into milchiks, or is it already too far and it won't make it asur?
Sir, can you say the layers again? So, because it's removed, so...
First, the meat went into the pot. You took this pot and you cooked it with meat, and the meat went into the pot. Then you cleaned out the pot, put it in the dishwasher.
Did you let it stand at all?
Like, it's the same day, assuming everything's the same day. Now, that pot now has meat in it, clean pot, but has meat in the walls of the pot. And now you cook pasta. Okay, so now the meat in the walls of the pot went into the pasta. And now you want that meat in the pasta to go into the cheese. So the question is, do we say that it could affect so far? It was a tam kolish. It's too weak at this point, and it will not affect our muscle. Now, just to explain this a little more, the Gemara says this is only by tam de hetera. So in other words, if you had a treifa pot, a real treifa pot that you got from your neighbor, Joe Chleiswat, and he cooked his real treifa stuff in that pot, and you cleaned it, and it's real clean, and you cooked your pasta in that pot. That pasta is treif. Now, if you would cook something with the pasta, the taste would continue going, and it will go 100 times from one food to the next food to the next food, because once the taste is usher, once it's usher, even a drop of issa that gets in, we're worried about. But here, again, meat is not usher. Meat is kosher meat. It only becomes usher when it fuses with the chalav. So we're saying at the point of fusion, it's already too weak that it won't create an isser of basar b'chalav. Okay, we had a similar concept with chametz. If you cook chametz before Pesach, maybe, it's machlokes, we said maybe the chametz is called heter, it's not usher yet. And maybe by the time Pesach comes, if it's already too diluted, it's already not bar not, perhaps it won't become usher on Pesach. It was such a concept. But then basar b'chalav, for sure that's what the Gemara discusses. So there is such a concept that when the fleishix goes into the next, the potato or the pasta, it's not going to go further into the meat. It won't asim it. So the Gemara actually says this. Dogam sha'olu b'kaira. So you have you put fish on a fleishiga plate. You serve fish on a fleishiga plate. So now the fish picks up. It's very hot fish. You put it down on the plate. It picks up. You use this plate the same day for meat. So now it picks up the taste of the meat into the fish. But you want to eat the fish with kutach, with it was a dip with a
sour cream,
yeah. So now this halacha happens to be there's no difference if it's cold or hot, because we know anything we don't eat milk and meat in the same course. At least in the same course we don't eat it. So even if the fish is cold now at this point, so if the fish would be considered fleishix, we would not eat it with milk. I wouldn't need to eat a piece of fish and take a drink of milk in the same course, because the fish would be fleishix. So the question is, if we consider it that if you would cook it together it would be usher, then we don't eat it together.
Do we differentiate by the type of plate or pots today? Because there's different coatings, like the pots of yesteryear were very porous.
Yeah, it's a good question, but in halacha we don't really.
So
glass is a question, but aside for glass, we don't.
Because we glaze porcelain dishes.
Yeah, it's true, but in halacha we don't really.
Okay.
Also today we don't eat fish and meat together.
Yeah, you don't eat fish and meat, but you don't eat fish and meat. Yeah, but there's no issue in putting fish on a
hot fish on a meat plate.
So that's the question. So now, so what is the halacha in regards to this? What is the halacha in regards to this question? So the Gemara seems to say it's mutter, but to be trying to make a difference between different scenarios, and here's the key. The Gemara seems to say it's okay. In other words, we're not going to take it further. Okay, we're not going to take it further. But the Rishonim make a differentiate as follows: that they say that this is very nice if I have a hot food that I put on a plate. But so that's in the Gemara. It's actually the machlokes, and we pass it. It's mutter, fine. But the Gemara's lashon is there's two points here. First point is the Gemara's lashon is dogam sha'olu b'kayr. If accidentally you put the fish on a meat plate, and now I want to eat it with my sour cream, so I'm allowed to. But the question is, could I put it in the meat plate in order to eat it with sour? In other words, do I intentionally create such a situation, or only after I accidentally put it on the meat plate, then I remembered, oh shucks, I put it on the meat plate. Now I want to have it with my sour cream, so then I could do it. But l'chatchila to walk into this situation, that we won't do.
What's the difference in the same ending? What's the difference?
It's a good question. It's a very good question what the difference is. It's actually a good question. But l'chatchila we don't do it. L'chatchila we don't do it. In other words, it's like things that have bittul. That once it's bottled you could eat it, but l'chatchila we don't make the bittul. So it's a similar concept here. So l'chatchila I'm not going to make the situation where you may have some taste of the meat ending up in the sour cream, even though in the end it will be actually mutter. So that's one thing. But the second point, which is even more complicated, is that the Gemara is talking about you put it on the plate. But if you actually, Rishonim say if it was cooked together on a fire, or it was fried together, which could even be worse, so it could be that's even worse. And there we will not allow you to go ahead and eat it with your sour cream. So if you went and cooked the pasta with the fleischiger pot, and now you want to eat it with cheese, so already that much we're not going to allow. If it was just put on a plate, you put it on the plate, and now you want to add the cheese to it, okay. But it was actually cooked. Cooked, why? What's the difference? Because when you cook it, that takes out, that really goes into the pot and pulls out the taste, really geschmack. So if you just put it on the pot and put it down on the plate, it doesn't pull it out as strongly. But if it cooks together, cooking really does a job, and it'll pull out all the taste, and therefore, that we're not going to accept and allow you to go and put the cheese on. So if it was the spashlu or nitzlu, that's worse. Okay, but even though it's worse, it seems that according to most poskim, okay, nothing is very clear 100%, and all the shittas here is complicated, but according to most poskim, if it's actually, once you cooked it together, and I added the cheese already, you're okay. Okay? Because it does have a din of a not bar not. Okay, so just to clarify this, so what came out over here? Now, if there's anyone's a Sfardim are very makel in these halachas of not barnat, and Sfardim hold that if you actually, you're not allowed to intentionally, like we said before, cook pasta in a fleischiger pot to mix it with cheese, that you can't do even according to Sfardim. But if you actually, to do that l'chatchila, but if you cooked already the pasta, the Sfardim will allow you to eat it with cheese. But the Ashkenazim we take it a step further, and we say no, you can't mix it with the cheese l'chatchila. But once you mixed it, then perhaps it could be mutter. According to Moshitas, mashal it's aser, but according to Moshitas, it will actually be mutter. Now, so is that clear? So what happens is very common. Your wife tells you she accidentally cooked the pasta in the fleischiger pot, and now she wants to put the cheese on it. We tell her, not so fast, buddy. You don't put it with the cheese on it. But if she already didn't ask you and already mixed the cheese in, and now you want to know if you could eat it, so there you have a situation of not bar not b'diavad, when it's already mixed in, that you would be allowed to eat it.
So l'chatchila she's not allowed to put it in.
Yeah, she should put it in. Right. Because it has the fleischiger taste in it. But since it's a secondary taste, it's a not bar not, so if it was done, it will be. Now, how far do we take this? We take this l'chatchila that I shouldn't eat it either in the same course. In other words, if it was cooked they made a pasta salad, and that pasta salad was cooked, let's say, in a milchiga pot, a ben yomi milchiga pot, and you want to serve it with your fleischiger meal, the pasta salad for Shabbos lunch, and you're having it in the fleischiger meal at the same time as the fleischigs, so we won't do that either. L'chatchila, we're going to call it fleishig, so we're not going to put it together. We're not going to have it on the table at the same time. Now, you could definitely have it at separate times. You could have one course, in the fish course you could serve it, and then when you bring out the meat, you have to remove it, because we don't consider fleishigs that it can't be at all. But at the same time, we won't eat it together, because anything that at the same time eat together, we're always choshish, you might cook it together, and since you're not allowed to cook it together, l'chatchila, so we won't eat it together. So anything that was made in a fleishiga, in a milchiga pot of a ben yoimai, so we will not l'chatchila put it together. If but with the abbot, if it gets mixed together, that's okay. Okay, that's where the situation stands.
And if it's not ben yoma?
Now, if it's not ben yoimai, so then we have two kulas here. One, that it's a not bar not, and two, that it's not even a ben yoimai. So then it would actually be mutter. Now, the question is how far. Would we say that you could actually? Your wife asked, could I use this fleishiga pot that's not a ben yoimai to cook my pasta, which I'm going to mix with cheese? That's already a subject of my machlokes, whether I could do that l'chatchila. But if she already baked it in the pot, and now she wants to mix the cheese in, that will already allow, because it's a ein ben yoimai.
So the havamina in that issue would be that you don't want to get used to doing that sort of thing. Is that right? Or is it more serious than that?
It could be it's a question of doing bittul l'chatchila, but yeah, question what the source of that issue is. But
Here's a question I've been waiting to ask for years. Come Pesach time,
Yeah.
they used to take
Switch
all their
them around.
pots, pans, whatnot, take them to the pot at the shul, and then they could use them.
kashrut, yeah.
What do you mean they used to?
No, it used to be your everyday stuff and as well.
Okay, what's kashrut is in the story? What's the kashrut in the story?
That's the question.
But you could use meat for dairy, dairy for meat.
Yeah, once it's kashrut, it's renewed. It's new again. But here we're talking about
Is
eating
that only
kashrut.
Pesach or all year
Anytime.
round?
Well, you can't do it the whole year. You can't switch it all year. But Pesach, it's different. So.
That's my question. Why can't you?
So that's his question. How come you can do it on Pesach, you can't do it all year?
Once you kasher it, you can use it for anything else. But if you have no reason to kasher, you can't just decide to kasher for milchik
So
deflation.
Pesach has a special.
Then you want to eat chametz, so you want to get out of the chametz. So once you get that,
So you mean if you're short a fleishiga pot, instead of going out to buy a pot, you know you've got all these milchiga pots. You want to kasher a milchiga pot, so you can now use it for fleishing. You can't do
you
that.
can't do that. But
But on Pesach?
if you're kashering for a different reason, then once it's kashered, you can use it for the other. Yeah.
What's the issue that would stop you from doing it? I mean, it sounds like the process of kashering would neutralize the pot. So why would we not do that? Is that because there's a concern you're going to get confused, or?
Yeah. Okay, so now the question is like this. Okay, so we have this clear? This is simple enough if you can remember the rules there. Now the question is, I cook my pasta in the fleishiga pot. I don't want to put cheese in it. I'm not going to put cheese in it, but I want to know if I could put it in a milchiga plate. Okay? In other words, to put cheese on it, I get it. It's a ben yoimei fleishiga pot, and l'chatchila, I'm not going to mix the cheese in it. But can I put it on? I'm serving milchiks over here. You know what I mean? So the question is, could I put it on a milchiga plate
When it's still hot.
when it's still hot? Yeah, when it's still hot. So there are those that say you can. That far we won't take it. So in other words, what's the logic over here? To put it together with cheese is the milchiks, you know, the real milchiks, and then I'm going to put it with this not bar not. L'chatchila, I'm not going to do that. But to put on a plate, the plate is not cheese. The plate has a taste of cheese inside it, maybe. Let's say it's a
Bar not
milchik plate.
also.
Right, it's also a not bar
Not
not.
bar not.
Right, so it's not bar not coming from both directions. So there, we're not going to have this l'chatchila. In other words, once I cooked it, I could put it into the kli of the other type. Okay, so I could put it from the fleishiga pot. I could take the pasta out and put it inside a milchiga pot if I want, or a milchiga kli. That I could do.
What if instead of cooking, you pickle it?
Pickle what?
Whatever you have there, a piece of fish, in a milchik's pot, and then you want to eat it on a fleishik's pot. Because you're dealing with vinegar and all kinds of stuff.
That's even more tricky, though.
Right?
What happens if instead of cooking it, you want to pickle it? So you pickle a piece of fish in a fleishik's pot. Can you eat it on a milchik's pot?
No, pickle is the same. We'll get to that. That's a good question. Yeah.
So it's cold, it's not hot when you're pickling, right?
Oh, pickling.
Yeah, the halacha of pickling is halacha of kavish k'mavushal. So something which sits and gets pickled. Kavish actually means like pickled, is as if it's cooking. So if it's pickled in a pot, that's as if it's cooked now. Usually kavish k'mavushal needs to sit there for 24 hours. So if it didn't sit there for 24 hours, we say it doesn't take anything out of the walls, and then you can do whatever you want with it. But if it has anything sharp in it,
That's what it is.
sharp spices or something in it, so it's pickled with sharp spices, so then it can happen in a much shorter time. And so anything that's kavish has the same halacha if it's cooked. Kavish is like it's cooked. So if it was sat in there and pickled in there, that would have the same halacha. Okay, so that's the deal. But here's the thing. Now here's a chumrah, which we pass on halacha l'maisa, which could be relevant. So in other words, we're saying that if you cook your pasta in a fleshika pot, now you want to move it over to a milchig keli, you can. But once I cooked it, now I'm looking for a plate, and all I found was a milchig plate. I could put it in a milchig plate.
From the
pot.
Cooked
From
directly.
the pot.
So now it's hot
It's hot. It's
and
boiling
maybe
hot.
and maybe wet.
Yeah, and I can put it in. But what I can't do is, if it's liquid, if you have a soup or a liquid that I cooked in a parva soup, that I cooked in a fleshika pot, and I need now my fleshika pot to make meatballs or whatever, so I want to transfer the food from the fleshika pot to the milchika pot. So I can't pour liquid from a fleshika pot to a milchika pot. Now, just to explain it in a simple way, because it's a little bit of a hard halacha, Ramah and Shach, is that we view it, because the water is connected at the same time to the fleshika pot and the milchika pot, we view it like you have two pots in a thing of hot water, where it could go from one to the next.
It connects.
Now this connects. Now in this case, we're only going to connect it, according to most places, one way. Since I'm pouring it from the fleshika pot to the milchika pot will become asa.
Is this only while it's hot?
While it's hot, yeah.
Once
It's cold doesn't matter.
Once it's cold, it's okay.
Yeah. So when it's hot, if I'm pouring the hot soup, which is parif, but it's cooked in a fleshika pot, and we said you'll have to take the pasta out of the fleshika pot and put it into the milchika. But here, where it's liquid, we consider the liquid taking the blias, so to say, out of the fleshika pot and depositing it into the wall of the milchika pot, and that will cause you a problem with your milchika pot.
If I use a ladle?
So if what is the ladle?
Ladle.
What is the ladle? Fleshika milchik.
Cliche.
Yeah. So the truth is, the ladle might have a din of a klisheni, might have a din of chavishan. That's a good question.
Use styrofoam.
What would the din of the ladle be?
Or pour it into a milchig pot.
Maybe it would be cooled down enough that it's not.
If it's cooled down, you won't have a problem. But if it's still very, very hot,
No.
But then you get hot when you put it in
it
the
gets
soup.
hot.
That's the
It becomes like
problem. It's the same.
chavishan.
If it's
Yeah.
fleshing, it's the same then.
Yeah, it might be the same. So that's something which one has to be careful of. When you're pouring it from one to the next, so then it doesn't. Okay, so how does this all come out practically? Halacha l'maisa. So halacha l'maisa, this happens many times. So again, this is all if it's a ben yoimai. If it's a ain't a ben yoimai, if one of the pots are not the same day, so ain't a ben yoimai, it would depend like this. Let's say you poured from the fleshika pot to the milchika pot. So if the fleshika pot is not a ben yoimai, so it's not really fleshiks, it's nice and tam of gam, it doesn't have a good taste in it, so then the milchika pot won't be asa. But if the milchig pot's not a ben yoimai, and you poured from the fleshik into the milchig, so you still have a problem, because you have fleshiks in the milchig pot. What are you going to use the milchig pot for now? Use it for milchiks, or you can use it for fleshiks. So you got a problem. So, but if the original pot is not a ben yoimai, then you're okay. So let's take a case. So your wife calls you up. I have a problem. I used the wrong pot. I used a fleshika pot to cook to bake my pasta or whatever I baked. So the first question you ask, was this pot used within 24 hours for milchiks? If it was not used within 24 hours for milchiks, you're good. For fleshiks, that is, you're good, because it's not a ben yoimai. It's not a ben yoimai, so you don't have to worry about the pasta. You can make your milchik thing with it. Usually the case is, in most cases, taka wasn't used within 24 hours because, usually it's not, but sometimes it has been. Sometimes it has been. So then you have a problem. If it has been used within 24 hours, then it's a case of nice and tam. And then you figure out what to do. You can't actually
Call it the Rosh Kola.
The question is, l'chatchila, whether if you're Sephardi, then you could mix it. If you're Ashkenazi, you won't mix it at that point into thing. Okay, next step, and then we'll get into more practical halacha applies. The next step is the knife. Okay, the knife questions. Why does the knife make things more complicated than everything else? So, technically it does, technically it doesn't. The knife, we have something called duchka de sakina. When you take a knife and you cut something hard.
What's that word? Duch?
Duchka, the pressing of the knife. So if you take a knife and you cut something that's hard, so we have a concept, the pressing could take in and put out taste. But it only does it when there's heat. If there's no heat involved, it won't transfer. So now, but the heat doesn't need the same strength as a heat when you're cooking in a pot. Could be even a klisheni. As long as it's hot in any way or form, and you press down with a knife.
Take a piece of roast beef.
You take a piece of roast beef, and you cut it with a milchig knife, you have a real problem. You have a problem with the knife, and you have a problem with your roast beef. Now, according to some shittas, your problem is not just where you cut the roast beef, it could be your problem spreads to the entire piece. So, could be with the Yevid, it's mutter, once you cut it, but the Yevid, it could be it's mutter, if you cut off the near around it. But definitely, l'chatchila, you have an issue.
So I'm not clear why knives are different. So we're saying because of the pressing, the cutting, but what's supposed to happen? Is it a transfer of tam?
Transfer of taste. If you have a milchix in the knife and it goes into the roast beef.
And we're saying because of the edge of the knife? Is that what we're saying? Why? I mean, something special about the knife. You wouldn't say that about
cutting, because you're cutting.
Pushing the knife into
pushing in. Or anything that you have to cut in, it pushes into something hard.
Not just touching.
So if you took a spoon and you were kind of pressing with a spoon, you could say, right.
Yeah, but if it's cutting, if you cut with a spoon, it's like a knife.
Right.
Any blade or something which cuts. Now, okay, so again, if the knife was not a ben yoimai, so who cares? So it's not a ben yoimai, so but the evidence mutter anyways. If you cut it with a milchig knife and the knife wasn't used, usually milchig knives, when was it used ben yoimai? I mean, it has to be something hot that day. Right, a hot milchik the same day, so it's not as common. So it won't answer your meat. But here's the deal. Here's where the complications arises. It says a tzinoin, it says a tzinoin, a radish or some kind of radish, which is sharp, that you cut with a knife, even if it's a cold knife. Even if it's a cold knife, if you cut the radish, even a cold radish that is with a knife, so the sharpness of the radish pulls in
increases the
it pulls in the taste from the knife into the radish, and vice versa. So if you're cutting anything sharp, we call it a dava charif. Anything sharp, it takes the taste of the knife and puts it into that thing sharp.
Could we get a list of what constitutes sharp besides onions, radishes, pickles?
Now, this question is the $1 million question. Could you get a list of what constitutes of something that is considered sharp? Now, the Gemara says one thing, tzinayin. The Rishonim debate whether that applies by other things or it's just tzinayin.
It's a good question.
Like
maror. Right? We use lettuce today.
What's considered sharp?
Yeah.
Lemons? With lemons?
Lemon, yes. Lemon, yes.
Yes.
What about bitter lettuce? Radicchio.
Well, it's bitter. It has to be sharp.
What's the difference between sharp and bitter?
So what's considered sharp? So some Rishonim say, no, it's just it's 9. And if you have anything that's outside, not it's 9, which most people maybe radishes, I don't know, that wouldn't be considered the dava charif, and you're good. But the simple psak halacha is that even anything that's sharp, for example, garlic or onion, or
lemon,
maybe chrein is a thing. So different spices, salt, anything that's very salty could be. It's all considered a herring. You cut your herring. You want to cut your herring with a knife. You cut your herring with a knife. So all these things could be considered sharp, and if you cut it with a knife, it'll take the taste of the knife. If it's a milchik knife, it will become milchik. If it's a fleshik knife, it will be fleshik. Totally, completely. Now, to add worry to worry, this could apply according to many Rishonim, even if it's not a ben yoimai. So even if you have your milchik knife that hasn't been used for quite a while, for hot milchiks, and you chop your onions in it, and now I want to put the onions in the fleshik soup, not so fast. Because since the onion is sharp, it's hadim machalya, it reawakens the taste, it pulls the taste out, and it freshens it up. It freshens it up. So it takes the taste that's in the knife, which might be considered a little bit sour, because it's not a ben yoimai, and it goes into the thing, and it freshens it up, and it becomes fresh mochaga onion. Now the question, and then you take this onion, and you put it in your fleshka soup, now you have a real problem. So the question is, how do we view this halacha? So again, so there are three concepts we're relying on. The first one is that anything sharp, even if it's a knot bar knot, right? Because it's went into the knife, now it's going from the line into the onion, then it's going to go from the onion into the soup. So it's a knot bar knot, which normally we wouldn't be concerned of b'di'evid. Once I cut it without realizing, I say, oh, I used the wrong knife. We'll say, okay, it's b'di'evid. So according to Sfardim, you can put it directly in the soup. For Ashkenazim, you can't. But if you put it into the soup, it would be the ever already. Should be mutter. You say no, it doesn't apply by something sharp. Something sharp takes the taste out. So that's one shita. Not muskim all the poskim, but that's how the psak is. And the second chumrah is that even if it's not a ben yoimai, we would consider it the same. Consider it that it freshens it up. And therefore, that's the onion issue, onion, garlic, and sharp things when you put it in. Now,
if you're cutting an onion on a milchik plate and using a parv knife,
yeah.
Does that make the knife?
So that could be it doesn't. It's just a plate. You don't have the.
The cutting board.
You don't have the.
No, I know what you can do,
Yeah.
but sometimes it just.
The cutting board.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, like the cutting board.
Cutting
You use the
board.
wrong
Cutting board could be. There's an issue. There's a question on that, but it's yeah, that's a good question. But simply, it's only the thing you're cutting with is the issue. So now, so what happens? Halacha Maisa, you know, this happens all the time. This happens all the time. So how do we look at it? So there are coolest that can be used, but see with other questions in a b'diavad situation. Okay? In other words, one has to be careful. You know, use a power of a knife. Use a power of a knife when you cut onions and other things. You shouldn't be using a milchik knife or a fleshik knife unless you know where the onion's going. If you know it's going to fleshik, you use fleshik. You know it's milchik, go milchiks. But the question is, once it's done, now what happens? So, there are what to rely on. In other words, we said it's a machlokes. There are some Rishonim that say that well, maybe onion's not considered sharp.
Oh, really?
Maybe it's not considered sharp. Maybe it's only at Sunayin. Some Rishonim say. So we won't rely on that on itself. But if you have something else and other tzirufei kulas, you know, to go with, there's a question like this: how much? Okay, let's say I have my knife. Okay, my knife is only so big, and the soup is very big. So could we say that you have 60 times in the soup against what's in the knife?
Interesting.
What knife went into the onions went into the soup. So what's the question? Do we go with 60 times at a knife, or do we go 60 times at an onion?
But you said before that the onion becomes all of the onion.
Right. So the question is, do we say all the onion becomes also? Once all the onion becomes also, so now you need 60 times against the onion, or do we go 60 times at a knife? Now this is machlokes, even though it's a chiddush, because really, even if it all went into the onion, but you can't make the isser bigger than it was. In other words, if the onion, if you cut something that's milchiks, so then the whole thing can become asa. But the onion is parav. So how much meat could be inside this onion? Only the same amount of meat that's in the knife. It's only the same amount of meat that's in the knife. So you can't have more than the original amount was. So there's a big svara to say that if you have 60 against the knife, then you're okay. There's a svara to say. There's a svara to say not like that, but there is a logic to say that, coupled with the fact that maybe the onion is not charif, that maybe that would also be a svara to be used.
How would you measure how much observing to the knife?
The size of the knife.
The size of
The size of the knife. It can't be more than the size of the knife. Right?
You use a hakaz, onion.
Even if you're making multiple cuts.
What?
You're making multiple cuts with
Making
that
multiple
knife.
cuts. So the question is, each time it should become usher, right? That's the question. He's bringing up a good point. In other words, let's say I have a fleshika pot, and I cook something in it. Okay, so it's fleshiks. Okay, now I cook something else in it. It's fleshiks. Now I cook something else in it. It's fleshiks again. So let's say I cook 100 things in that pot. Wait a second. The pot could only go 60 times the walls of the pot. The more I keep on cooking with this pot, I don't have any more. But we don't say that. We look at each cooking as a new issur. So he's saying each time I cut with the knife, each slice I take with the knife, I cut and 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 I cut. So maybe we could start all over again on each cut. And it's actually a very good svara. But again, there's room to be makel if b'shas adchak over here. So that's what comes out. So when a person has a knife, just keep it simple. A person has a knife and he's cutting his onions. So if he ended up cutting his fleshiga onions, his onions that's going into fleshiga soup or cholent with a milchig knife, you better ask a shaila. Now, even this, we had it once here that cholent was made. It's cut with a milchig knife. We picked out whatever onions we could pick out. We matzah the soup, the cholent, but the onions itself could be more of an issue because that has the both blias in it. But that's one thing. Now, so basically, this sharpness is only when it's not cooked yet. So let's say what would happen is like this. Sometimes your wife will make a soup. She'll make a soup and put an onion in the soup and put other things in the soup and start cooking it. Okay? And then she wants to crush it up. So they have these hand...
Blenders.
My wife calls it the zhuzher.
Yeah, you turn it on and the judges, that's right. And you smash everything up. So that has a blade and it's cutting the onions. So there's a svara. So let's say it always happens without fail that they take the wrong one. They take the milchiga one for the fleshiga soup. And the question is, now what do I do? So
Always use the other one that you're thinking.
you have a question with the blade. You have a question with the blade. And you have a question with the blade. But the question is, what's with the soup? I ended up smashing the onions with a sharp, with a milchiga blade.
And it's a lot of
And then
cuts.
it's what?
And it's a lot of cuts.
There's a lot of cuts. Yeah. So here there's another svara, which is that once it gets cooked, once it's cooking, it loses its sharpness. So in other words, the onion is only sharp when it's not cooked yet. But once it starts cooking, the cooking process starts really taking place in it. So then there's a svara to say it loses its sharpness. Kids, you have to know the situation, but if it's in a big pot of soup, it loses its sharpness, and then we won't consider it a davar charif. So if my blender is not a ben yaimai, I don't have a problem. You avoid that issue. So that's something which one could take into consideration. Okay, end of the day, halacha l'maisa. Okay, so let's give an example. Okay, so your wife fried onions in a frying pan, in a fleshiga frying pan, and she took a milchiga spoon and mixed the onions while it was frying in a fleshiga frying pan. So, question, could I use the onions? Could I use the spoon? Could I use the frying pan? You got a real problem over here, huh? So, assuming if everything was a ben yaimai, everything is the same day, you really cooked. I mean, you have a milchiga spoon that was used and a fleshiga pot, and the milchigas went into the fleshig went into the milchigas. You got a real royal disaster over here. Okay. The question is, if one is not a ben yaimai, let's say the spoon is not a ben yaimai. This milchiga spoon wasn't used for hot coffee in a full day. So, and many times you don't know, it could be a suffix. You take the spoon from the drawer. That's a big suffix. It's a suffix, at least maybe it wasn't used the same day. You don't know which spoon, so they get suffix involved. So they have a suffix. Maybe that spoon wasn't used the same day, so it's Ein Ben Yomei. But it's with hot onions. Hot onions. It's roasting. It's hot onions. Hot onions refresh the spoiled taste of the old milk in the spoon. Now you have a refreshed spoiled taste that goes into the onions, and the onions into the pot, and there's no not by not over there because you have onions, and now you got your same problem over again. You have the milchige spoon getting into the onions, getting into the pot.
But I thought we said the onions lose their sharpness if
So now the question would be, how long have these onions been in the pot? If they were just cut and just started the cooking, it would be hard to say they lost the sharpness. But it could be if it's already roasted for a while, especially if there's a lot of oil going on there, then perhaps there's a svara that it's okay. Perhaps there's a svara that would be okay. Now, if you have a lot of oil and then it goes from the spoon to the oil to the onions, there's also a question of that. I'm not going to go into that now. There are other questions involved over here. But just to give a simple solution, okay. So that's just to give a basic idea of how these issues go with the knives and the other things. Okay, now let's just cause some common kitchen questions that come up. So I found in my dishwasher, in a fleishige dishwasher, I found a milchige, whatever I found, plate or a spoon, who knows what. I get a call like this at least once a week. Okay, it's mixed in. It gets mixed up. It ends up in the dishwasher, and it's the wrong time. What do I do? What do I do with all the stuff in the dishwasher? What do I do with this plate? What do I do with dishwasher?
Why isn't it considered like it's been kashered? The water in there is like very, very hot.
you can't push them together.
And it takes a very long time. It's in there for quite a long time. And you've got a number of cycles. You know.
Detergent.
Huh?
First of all, it's never immersed, though.
Yeah. I mean,
It's never immersed.
Detergents do not.
And it's
So
never
if-
boiling.
Make it,
It gets
So
hot.
the question,
Well,
let's just clarify what the question is in this case, without answering your question for now. In this case, you had in the same dishwasher fleishige and milchiks.
Right.
Okay, that's the question. You know, if I did fleishiks and then I did a run, and now I did milchiks, maybe a question if it's kasher. But here I had the milchiks and fleishiks in the same dishwasher going at the same time. So now, the question would be, were the plates clean? Some people rinse off the plates before they put them in, and some people don't. So if they weren't rinsed off, so now I have a question, what happens in dishwasher? Go for the same price in a sink. I have in a sink. I washed my fleishige dishes in the sink, and then I noticed a milchige spoon in there. I just finished washing the dishes, I noticed a milchige spoon. So the question will be like this. You have the hot water coming out of the spout. Hot water coming out. That's irui, call that irui kli rishon. It's coming out of the kli rishon. The water's coming out. And it hits, it could possibly, let's say you could have a piece of meat, residue meat left over. It'll hit that piece of meat. And perhaps, it could happen, let's imagine the worst. That piece of meat ended up on the milchige spoon. And the hot water, what do we worry about? The hot water will hit that meat and hit the spoon at the same time and put the taste of the meat into the spoon. That's the concern, right? That's the concern.
Right. It's like cooking in a fleishige pot now.
Yeah.
But we also have another situation where the water keeps getting recycled by the pump. So it's like until it's pumped
We
out.
usually don't use that. The water coming in is clean water.
Yes, but it's a lot of dishwashers recycle the same water.
He's stuck in the sink now. They were talking in the dishwasher.
But the dishwasher brings back the dirty water and spreads it around again? Yes, I don't know.
I wouldn't think so. I don't think so. No, you can hear it running out all the time.
Yeah, okay. But let's start with the sink. We'll get to the dishwasher. So the sink. So you have the hot water. It's just easier to imagine the sink. So you have the hot water coming out, and it goes on, and it might have hit the fleishiks, and at the same time it hit the milchiks. So the question would be, what power does irui kli rishon have? In other words, it's the water's coming from the boiler. That's where it's cooked. And it's pouring through the pipes and into the sink.
So is the pipe now a new keli?
we don't consider it, it's actually a very good question, but halacha we don't consider it because it gets hot with the water. And, it's actually a good question, but we're going to consider it l'chumra that it's considered not a nukli, and it's iri coming out of the pipe and coming in. He's trying to find the het.
It means two hot water tanks.
Yeah. So the question is iri kli rishon. Now, the assumption now is going to be, let's assume, because we could say maybe the water's not so hot, but the assumption is the water's very hot, and it's coming out, and it's called Iwa Shaloi Nifsa Kakiluach. In other words, there's no break in the stream. If there's a break in the stream, that could take away the power of ability it has to cook. But here there's no break in the stream, it's coming down, and it hits the fleshig, and that goes into the mochiks. So, l'chayra, we're going to say the water has the ability to take taste out of the meat and put it into the water, and then from the water into the spoon. That will be the chashash. So there's a Ramah about that. There's a Ramah about this, and we're going to be machmer on that. If we know that happened, we would be machmer. If we know we had a stream from Be'iri Klirishin going on the fleshiks hitting the spoon, machmer. The problem is we have a suffix here. We don't know that's what happened. We don't know the fleshig went, right? Maybe the meat never was on top of the spoon. If the meat was never on top of the spoon, the hot water would have had to hit the meat, and then later go back onto the spoon. That is already klisheni, right? Because it's only in the stream that we'd have a problem. Once it lands, the water, and now ends up somehow on the spoon, that's only, once it lands, it's considered a klisheni, which does not have the same power.
So we're not worried about the splashback, if it splashes back.
Right, so if it splashes back, it's not such a concern. It's still a cliche, and we don't do that, and it could be because of mashal, it's a problem, but one of the yevet aser the spoon, so that won't be as much of a concern. Now, if the kelim are clean, Ramah says it's not maflud mavliya ka'achas, even if the stream is touching the milk kli and the flesh kli at the same time, it could be that wouldn't be a problem. That's also a subject to machlokes, but Ramah seems to say that would be okay. But if you actually have a piece of fleshik there, that would be a concern. So there is a svara to say, who said the fleshik, a piece of meat, residue meat, was on top of the spoon at the time I washed it. Now, sometimes you use a, one of these, a brush or a sponge, to scrape, and that sponge might be full of fleshiks, and you're using it, so maybe there's also a svara. Now, there's another svara to say, another reason it shouldn't be asur, because if you could wash it with your hands without wearing gloves, then perhaps the water is not really hot enough to cook. It's not yad soletis bar. Your hands are not burning on it. Now, a lot of ladies could put their hands in water that's considered yad soletis because they're used to it. But if a man's doing it, he probably can't. And you can assume the water's not as hot unless he's wearing gloves. But that's a svara. That is a svara too. Usually the men end up doing these mistakes. So
based on a tinok puts his hand in there.
Yeah, if it burns, there's a question is how hot is it. So many times that is hot. There's another svara that a lot of times, could cause a problem in Hilchos Shabbos. A lot of times there's cold water. It's one faucet, so there's cold water that mixes into the hot water at the same time as pouring. And Rav Moshe says that could take away the ability for the hot water to cook. And therefore, all these svaras together are svaras to say it would not asur the spoon. Now, l'chatchila, one should take the spoon and kasher it. The question always comes up, if you have something that can't be kashered, it's porcelain or something that can't be kashered, so you should ask a Rav. But there are svaras many times to be matter because there was sveikus over here. So now getting back to the dishwasher, if it's in a dishwasher, it comes out of the dishwasher, so if you always rinse off the plates and they're cleaned, basically, when they go in. So now the chashash that the stream of water is going to hit the fleshiks and take the fleshiks and hit the milchig pot is reduced. Okay? There's another svara that sometimes it gets so hot inside these dishwashers, it steams. It's like it's a big zay, it's one big steam bath, and it can actually transfer the tam. That would be a bigger chashash. Well, that's a bigger chashash. That could asur if you have enough fleshiks that you don't have shishim against the fleshiks. That could be enough to asur the milchaga thing that's in there. So again, if you have something that was out of the dishwasher, so l'chatchila one should kasher it. Something that can't be kashered, you should ask a shiloh, because there are svaras to say that it couldn't. You have to know what kind of water was in this dishwasher. It's iri klivishin, and the question is, if it would actually aser when it hits. Is it going to hit the fleishiks and the milchiks at the same time? And then you have a question of the steam. So that's how it would. That's how it would be a concern if it was a concern. Understanding this, if a guy used the dishwasher separately for milchiks and the fleishiks, so even though the dishwasher is really fleishiks, let's say, but that's only if it's more or less clean, the dishwasher, so it's only blias in the walls, that wouldn't aser the stuff. I mean, one lechatchila should designate the dishwasher for milchiks or fleishiks, or somehow kasher in between or something, but lechatchila it should be designated milchiks or fleishiks. But if by accident it was cooked, you put something fleishiks in there, we understand that the irui, sometimes some dishwashers has an element within the dishwasher, and then that could be considered not irui, but actually ala eish, water that's ala eish.
When you say element, you mean like the heating?
The heating element could
like
be inside.
When it's drying, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the heating coil.
Right,
at
so
the
it could
bottom.
be there's an element inside the dishwasher,
Yeah.
and those dishwashers, it's more chamer, because actually that wouldn't be considered irui kli rishon, that would be considered water that's a kli rishon in itself. And that could cause a bigger issue to your, if you had actually pieces of fleishiks in the pot, that could cause an issue. Even if you didn't have pieces of fleishiks in the pot, if it's considered one big steam full of water where you have milchik kalim and fleishik kalim, that could cause a bigger issue, and the shaila should be asked. But if it's if you don't have the element in it that takes away that problem, it's only a question of irui, the water that's spurting from something hot, that's one step down, and there could be room to be makel in different situations. A shaila would have to be asked. But just to give you an understanding of the questions at hand.
What about the other way?
What?
You put a milchiks dish into a fleishiks, and it had milchiks on it.
Yeah.
What about all the other fleishiks?
What about all the other stuff? That's also a problem. What about all the other stuff? What about everything else? Right. That's it. So if you're talking about the steam, could be you don't have shishim. In other words, if the fleishik pots have a lot of stuff, a lot of fleishik pots, but the milchik pot has only one. So it could be you don't have shishim against that. And the question again, does the stream hit? So that's more kuladik. We have to say the stream hit the milchiks and shot it back, of course, onto a fleishik pot, and at the same time, put blias in, and you don't know where it is, all kinds of smekas. There's room to be making. One should ask a shaila in such a situation. I'm going to have to leave a little early.